when Battle Styles first came out, the two new Urshifu cards were both pretty cool, but the Rapid Strike Urshifu card immediately dominated the format. Single Strike Urshifu Vmax was a pretty cool card, but didn't get played as much. Now in this new format, both versions of Urshifu are still legal for play, but due to the domination of Shadow Rider Calyrex, both versions haven't been played very much. However, I think the Single Strike Urshifu Vmax deck might have a better shot at taking down Shadow Rider than the Rapid Strike Urshifu. So let's take a look at a new Single Strike Urshifu Vmax deck. Alright, so we've got the deck here, and as you can see, not a ton of variety in the card choice. There's a lot of repeats, which is actually kind of cool to see. We've seen a lot of decks that have had lots of different cards, so I'm kind of happy to see a deck that's a bit different. But we're going to go ahead and get started with our Single Strike Urshifu V. Take a look at him first. So the Rapid Strike Urshifu V isn't that great, but I think Single Strike Urshifu V is definitely better of the two Urshifu V cards. Laser Focus is a pretty awesome attack. Search your deck for up to 2 fighting energy cards and attach them to this Pokemon. So that's for just 1 fighting energy. Usually there's a couple turns at the beginning of the game that there's not really an attacking going on, both players are just getting set up. So that's a good opportunity to use Laser Focus. It gets you set up for that energy that you need to get onto your Urshifu Single Strike, because its Vmax has a big attack that requires a lot of energy. Impact Blow is the other attack on Single Strike Urshifu V for those 3 energies, which can easily be brought around by Laser Focus. 180 damage during your next turn. This Pokemon can't use Impact Blow, so if you do use Impact Blow, it might be a good idea to evolve it into a Pokemon VMAX next turn, so that way you can use a different attack and not have to go back to Laser Focus, because there's really no reason to use Laser Focus on the same Urshifu V 2 times in a row. And then this Pokemon is Single Strike, obviously, because it's Single Strike Urshifu V. Alright, now let's take a look at the Vmax. So 330 HP, Single Strike, it is Gigantamax, and this is a pretty cool card. I definitely like the way this Single Strike Urshifu Vmax looks opposed to the Rapid Strike one. I'm not sure, there's just something weird about the Rapid Strike Urshifu Vmax, and so I definitely prefer the Single Strike one. So we have Beatdown for those 3 energies. There's a solid 100 damage. Not the most damage, but it is something. If you don't quite have enough energy to do Gmax 1 blow, or maybe Beatdown is all you need, there is that attack on there, and you can up the damage amount if you put enough Single Strike energy, which we'll touch on later. And then we have Gmax 1 blow, which is what this deck is all about. Gmax 1 blow dishes out a whopping 270 for those 4 energies. It says discard all energy from this Pokemon. This attack's damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So one concern with these Pokemon VMAX decks is always Zamazenta V. Zamazenta V shuts down all damage from Pokemon VMAX to it and can easily shut down any VMAX deck. But Gmax 1 blow goes straight to Zamazenta and would immediately knock it out. And it does discard all energy from Single Strike Urshifu Vmax, but there is a way we work around that. We'll touch on that in a bit. And then again, it does go through all effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, which is huge. There's a lot of stuff that can shut down damage from these popular Pokemon V, like I know there's an Altaria from Champion's Path that can be annoying. So Gmax 1 blow, you don't have to worry about having to put up with those Pokemon that prevent damage. It just goes straight through it and dishes out a lot of damage at 270. And of course, we're going to be loading this guy up with Single Strike energy, which will make the damage go up to probably enough to one-shot those Pokemon VMAX. So one concern with these fighting type decks is obviously Shadow Rider Calyrex. That seems to be the way to go in this current format. It's just a very consistent deck, and while there is the threat of Galarian Moltres to the deck, it's still not powerful enough to get through Shadow Rider Calyrex. And so as you can see, this Pokemon does have a Psychic type weakness, but what I think is that if you can time your piloting of this deck and making sure that you are playing it safe in the prize race, Gmax 1 blow can one-shot your opponent's Shadow Rider Calyrex, And so I think that if you can just get things going faster than Shadow Rider Calyrex, you can one-shot it, and you can one-shot lots of other Pokemon. So I do think that Single Strike Urshifu Vmax has a lot of potential in going up against Shadow Rider. We have our other attacker in the deck besides the Urshifu Vmax. We just have one copy of Tyranitar V, which is a Single Strike at 230 HP, pretty solid HP amount for a Pokemon V. We have Cragalanche for a Dark Energy into Colorless, does 60 damage and discards the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. Not the greatest attack, but it is something. And we have Single Strike Crush, which does 240 damage, 2 Dark and 2 Colorless, and discards the top 4 cards of your deck. So that may not look too great discarding the top 4 cards of your deck, but it can be worth it to dish out that 240 damage. You may be wondering, why are we using a Dark type Pokemon that requires Dark type energy in this Fighting type deck? And that's because we're playing Single Strike Energy, which provides not just Fighting energy, but Dark type energy as well. So if we throw those Single Strike energies onto Tyranitar, that Single Strike Crush attack can be very similar to Gmax 1 Blow. So this is an alternative attacker if we're not able to use the Single Strike Urshifu Vmax. And let's take a look at this type again. It's Dark type. What's Shadow Rider's weakness? Dark. So Tyranitar is definitely a good card to go up against those Shadow Riders, and I definitely think you could easily up the count of this if you want, and put in maybe some other Single Strike Dark Pokemon. And I feel like this would be really good to go up against Shadow Rider calyrex. And then we have the engine that fuels all of this Single Strike energy acceleration. We have 4 copies of Houndoom Single Strike to evolve into Houndoom with Single Strike. The Darkest Fane is an attack we'll be using, but Single Strike Roar is an ability that we will be using. It says, once during your turn, you may search your deck for a Single Strike energy card and attach it to one of your Single Strike Pokemon. Then shuffle your deck. If you attach an energy to a Pokemon in this way, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So you may be thinking, oh, I don't like that, I don't want to put damage cards on my own Pokemon, but remember that Shadow Rider is most likely going to be OHKOing your Single Strike Urshifu Vmax, so it doesn't really matter if there's some extra damage counters on there, and it's definitely worth it to be able to go into your deck and immediately find those energies and accelerate them. Since you'll be needing 4 to dish out Gmax 1 Blow, it's definitely good to have this energy acceleration, and remember, Single Strike energies can up the damage of your attackers as well. So we have a 4/4 line of Houndour and Houndoom, and I also forgot to mention that we have a Single Strike Urshifu V and Vmax 4/4 line as well. The final Pokemon we have is Crobat V. We have 1 copy of him, just so we can play him onto our bench with Dark Asset and potentially draw some cards if we need to. Let's move on to the trainer cards. So we have our pretty standard supporter cards with Professor's Research 4 copies, so we can draw cards. Always a good mechanic to have in any deck. You always need to be drawing cards so you can find what you need. We have 4 copies of Marnie for the same purposes of drawing cards, and also some maybe disruption on your opponent's side if they've built up a big hand. 2 copies of Boss's Orders. We have a lower count of Boss's Orders just because Gmax 1 Blow and Single Strike Crush often are enough to one-shot the opponent's Pokemon, and so Boss's Orders isn't as necessary, but you never know when we might have to go after a Pokemon VMAX that's on the bench, so there are a couple copies of Boss in here. And then we have 2 copies of B, which is a pretty cool one. So again, discarding the top 5 cards of your deck, kind of like Tyranitar Single Strike Crush, and attaching those energy cards you discarded in this way to your bench to find new Pokemon in any way you like. So we have 2 copies of this in here just because it is a good way to out of nowhere accelerate some energy. And if you do end up discarding some trainer cards, it's fine because like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of repeat in the trainer cards. You have multiple copies of a lot of them, so that's fine. And then if you discard Pokemon, there's Ordinary Rod to bring this back, and then of course if you're discarding energy, they get accelerated. So B is definitely a good card for any fighting type deck. We have Stadiums in here, Tower of Darkness, Single Strike. Once during each player's turn, the player may draw 2 cards. In order to use this effect, the player must discard a Single Strike card from their hand. So of course, we have lots of Single Strike cards in here with Tower of Darkness, Urn of Vitality, we have the Houndour, Houndoom, the Tyranitar, and the Urshifus, as well as Single Strike Energy. So there's lots of Single Strike cards you can discard, and that's a good way to be consistently able to draw some cards with Tower of Darkness. let's take a look at the item cards now. We have 3 copies of Evil Incense. So the alternative to Single Strike Urshifu is the Rapid Strike version, and that has Octillery, which is able to find you any Rapid Strike card once during your turn. And that is awesome, but unfortunately we don't have that in the Single Strike Urshifu deck, and so to find our Pokemon we need a little bit more Pokemon search, so we do have to run Evil Incense in here so we can find our Urshifu Vmax and Houndoom so we can get rolling with those energy accelerations and attackers, because like we mentioned earlier, the goal with this is to get set up as fast as you can so that way you can start taking knockouts before Shadow Rider. We have 1 copy of Ordinary Rod, choose 1 or both, shuffle up to 2 Pokemon, and shuffle up to 2 basic energy. So if we end up discarding some Pokemon with B accidentally, then we can use Ordinary Rod to bring those back. Always good. Maybe if our Tyranitar is forced to get discarded early on and we want to bring him back, we can do that with Ordinary Rod. And then we have 4 copies of Quick Ball, so Evil Incense grabs the Evos, and Quick Ball can help us get the basics, so we can find any of those basic Pokemon. And then we have 4 copies of Switch. Felt like Air Balloon isn't a good inclusion if your Pokemon have higher retreat costs. Urshifu Vmax has 3, so I didn't want to put in Air Balloon. There weren't really any good tools for this deck, so I just went with a higher count of Switch. If you want to bring this down for some other cards, you can definitely do that though. And then 4 copies of Urn of Vitality. So this is an interesting one. It's Single Strike. It says shuffle up to 2 Single Strike energy cards from a discard pile into your deck. So this is awesome because with this Urshifu Vmax, Gmax 1 blow discards those Single Strike energy that we have on here, and to take out another Pokemon with our next Urshifu, we'll need those Single Strike energies again, and we want to get them back into the deck so we can accelerate them with Houndoom. So Urn of Vitality is kind of the 3rd part of this deck in addition to Urshifu and Houndoom. So with Urn of Vitality, it just makes everything flow and helps us to keep that cycle of Single Strike energy going. And finishing off with the energy cards, we have 6 copies of Basic Fighting Energy, just kind of in here so we can accelerate them with B, as well as with Laser Focus. And then we have 2 copies of Stone Energy. This is the same as a Fighting Energy, but it takes 20 less damage from attacks, so not a bad Fighting Energy to have in here. And then we have our main event, Single Strike Energy. It is Single Strike, so it can be discarded with Tower of Darkness, and it can only be attached to a Single Strike Pokemon, but it says as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides Fighting and Dark type energy, but provides only 1 energy at a time. And the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So already dishing out a lot of damage with Single Strike Crush and Gmax 1 blow, and so the Single Strike energy can up the damage even more and help you to dish out a lot and take out those Pokemon Vmax in just, I guess, 1 blow. If you enjoyed today's deck breakdown of this Single Strike Urshifu Vmax deck, give that like button a hit and hit the subscribe button as well. Leave me a comment letting me know what you think of this strategy of trying to counter that Shadow Rider calyrex deck that has been dominating the standard format. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. I upload new videos every Monday and Thursday and you definitely don't want to miss them. That's it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, trainers.